About 382 AD, in the days of Jerome, known for the Latin Vulgate, a new term began to circulate in Bible scholarship, according to R.H. Charles. Certain texts of historical value, and even canon, were now labeled as something other than inspired scripture. The very concept is a clear redefining of books already in existence, and in most cases, text recorded as inspired scripture and Bible canon now somehow in question by those without any such authority. This paradigm remains today even further rooted, as if it ever represented the historical approach to these Old Testament texts, as some vet as truth. How do these texts stand up to the Torah test? The answer on many of these books will likely shock especially scholars who have never actually conducted such research, which becomes evident. It's not in their paradigm. This canon was already chosen before there were Pharisees in Jerusalem and before there was ever a Catholic Church. Those factions do not get to legitimately form councils to vote on that which was already settled fact long before, even in archaeology. You are entering a zone for truth with our new Apocrypha test series. Follow along, and together we will dispel the myths of modern scholarship. And man, are they profoundly lacking in intellect on this topic, you will see. Not anymore. Download your copies of Volume 1 and Volume 2 of our comprehensive Apocrypha research, free in eBook today, or get your copies at apocryphatest.com. All links are there. We now begin. Last video, we established the only biblical track of what we call Bible Canon. There is no other. It's the only authorized, ordained library, period, of such, and it was found with the temple priests who were commissioned and ordained to be the custodians of inspired scripture. There's no one else. There's no other option. There are no alternatives, period. And basically, they selected the Old Testament as it was written all along. They did not leave it for centuries later so that somebody could then go through their library and vote on it. That's ridiculous, especially not Pharisees, who are the opposite of the Bible paradigm, nor the Catholic Church, which is equally opposite, and the notion is ludicrous. To think that it waited for Protestantism, you've got to be kidding me. This is all just a completely illiterate paradigm. What we principally hear out there from scholars, they call themselves scholars, but they are not on this topic very clearly, is they ignore the only Bible canon with historicity, following the ordination. We hear two things, two alternatives, they say. There are none, but let's deal with those in this video and the next. This one, let's talk about the Greek Septuagint translation from the Hebrew, created into Greek, created beginning in around 300 AD. Now, is that a reality? Yes, it was created, but by whom, where, how? That becomes interesting. Wait till you see the origin of this. You're going to be disgusted. And when, in addition to that, we often hear of Josephus's 22 books of the Old Testament because Josephus is the ultimate expert, right? Wrong. He's the opposite. Yahusha called him and his faction liars, hypocrites, seed of Satan, the serpent, vipers. How many times did he have to rebuke them before we all realize that, right? But scholars don't know this? Are you kidding? It's called willing ignorance, in which they do not even know what 22 books he meant, by the way, because he was not specific. Oops. Oops. That's a big oops, especially to assume that Esther was in there. Yes, he uses Esther as historic, but he does not say it's Bible canon. And when he's labeling the books, it sounds like he meant Ezra, not Esther, which is the same period. How about that? In fact, same with the Dead Sea Scrolls, no Esther fragments were ever found. Didn't happen. No. And when you see that, it is a complete lie, and it's very easy to pick apart. The story comes out of first Esdras by the prophet Ezra. That's who it is in every single fragment. It even identifies him as priest Ezra. Duh, that's not Esther. I'm sorry. I know scholars just don't know these things. But most are unaware whom he was and he was not. And they'll even argue with it. They'll try to debate. Oh, no, he wasn't a Pharisee. Oh, really? Watch the next video. See for yourself. What did he say in his own words? Well, he said he was a Pharisee. He said he was an Essene. If you want to know what the Essenes kept as scripture, go to Josephus. You don't go to the Dead Sea Scrolls where no Essenes lived. Ha! How about that? That exposes the whole paradigm. Talk about a bold-faced lie. Now, we'll deal with him in the next video. In this installment, we'll go back to the claim from those basically claiming the Septuagint as an authority on Bible Canon. Yes, we agree it is a useful translation. It has a purpose. And though rare, we have used it at times to confirm things in which it has served a good purpose. However, what it is not, it is not a list of books of the Old Testament, and it never was. To think that it was is ridiculous. Now, it was first created as only 5 books and then added to, which, by the way, is going to tell us a lot. Wait till you see in this video. However, what is really revealing is the origin of the history of its creation or claimed creation. This really tells all when you understand it. Let's go there, and you will see for yourself. Now, first we'll start with later sources. Why? Because we're going to expose modern scholarship. They're listening to the dumbest things, and they don't even know it because they've accepted things in the modern paradigm that they cannot if they go back in more ancient terms. This does, whether they like it or not. We'll go back, we'll show you what they are quoting, or in Pharisee land, essentially. Retelling, because that's what they do with embellishment, changing the story, just as the Talmud was written. Just go read it. The Talmud doesn't even agree with itself. It discredits itself, really. It's one great big argument and debate, and it is nonsensical. I mean, no one would even think to talk that way, except for rabbis, of course. It is the worst way to record what they call scripture, and prophets did not operate in such a way. Prophets weren't back and forth. Maybe this, maybe that. Prophets were, this is the truth, period, the end. I know people don't like it when we do that, but you know what? That's what the Bible does. It certainly is not a Bible practice to do that. Now, they tell us 6 members of each of the 12 tribes of Israel were invited to Egypt to participate in translating the Hebrew Old Testament, the origin basically, into the Greek language. Now, nothing wrong with that on the surface. It sounds okay. Of course, until one looks even a little into the detail. And again, the Greek Septuagint is useful. It does serve a purpose. But to go back and make that translation after the fact, the origin, you don't get more stupid than that. And those are scholars? Yeah, right. Of what? The author of this original claim clearly had no clue, and they haven't bothered to either read it or they don't pay attention. And yes, we've seen the likes of even R.H. Charles and others just kind of accept this story, yet when you see it, you've got to be kidding. Knowing that it's a lie, but then okay with the fact that 72 translators went to Egypt, left the temple, went to Egypt, and translated there because what? The temple didn't have the resources anymore? Are you kidding? How ridiculous. Anyway, so basically, when you think about this, the 12 tribes were not the keepers of Scripture. Oops, there's already a big problem. Only one tribe was, the Levites. And that right there tells you that this is going to be a false narrative from the outset. So this is illiterate from the start. Just know that. But we're going to go through this history because everybody should know it and understand it, because this is what people are quoting, not even knowing it. Why? Because they're getting it from more modern sources, from the Talmud, etc., the Catholic Church even. Yes, they also have propagated this, at least some, and I'll show you. The Greek Septuagint began to be translated around 300 BC. At that time, there were no Pharisees and no factions calling themselves rabbis, at least not in Jerusalem. Yeah, they were up in Samaria practicing, which is where they came from, but that's another story we cover in detail. Watch the True Biblical Israel. That is a Pharisee term you see in the New Testament, notice, because the Pharisee Sanhedrin was in charge of the worship system at that time. Illegally so, of course, and called out many, many times by Messiah and also by the temple priests. We covered a couple of videos ago. If you haven't seen that, go back and watch. However, here is what the illiterate Talmud, proven so many times to be so, says in Megillah 9a. Their words right here from Sefaria.org. Rather say in explanation of the Baraita, and our rabbis permitted them to be written only in Greek. See, notice how rabbis have the ultimate authority on what? Nothing! This is false anyway. Not a single rabbi was even in Jerusalem in 300 BC, so this is a stupid statement and is a complete lie. Just to start right there. Because the Old Testament doesn't call the temple priests rabbis. See, they do not get to take credit for any of this, though perhaps they did create the false story in the first place, which is probable. And maybe some Pharisees did participate in the Egyptian translation of the Septuagint. That is possible, because you know what? Lost tribes did not. Now, we're going to cover that. Now, it reads just like Maccabees and Judith, and really Esther, even though Persian. These are four texts that fail in the Apocrypha. The pattern's obvious, and that's what you're going to see throughout when we deal with those texts. And we'll get to them each in detail. We've already covered testing the book of Esther. You can check that out now, but we will be adding to that. And it is taught in another Baraita that Rabbi Yehuda said, who cares, right? Even when a Pharisee Yehuda, who cares? Even when our rabbis permitted Greek, they permitted it only in a Torah scroll. In other words, what they call the 5 books of the Bible, the Pentateuch, if you will. Problem is, the temple priests did not keep 5 books as Torah. Oops, they kept 6. And we're going to tell you about that in a minute. Now, what are they doing here? They say basically not for other books of the Bible, which must be only in Hebrew. They claim that you weren't even allowed to put those in Greek. Now, that did happen, so something's missing from this paradigm. This is, 800 AD or so, when the Talmud is written, and this happened long before that. The Septuagint translated most of the Old Testament, plus many of the books of Apocrypha even. Again, it is not the end-all authority. It's not an authority at all. The temple priests in Qumran are, and they're an authority that cannot be overruled by anyone. Now, only Torah was translated first, understand that, and cool. 5 books, they say, which is already a Pharisee problem, because in this text, they're claiming Torah's 5 books, and it's actually 6 to the temple priests. Oops. But the Septuagint would eventually include the other books of what we call Bible, again, including the Apocrypha. They were not called Apocrypha, though, at that time, not until Jerome, in 382 AD, decided to create a category in English called Hidden Away Books. Pretty stupid, yeah, but he did nevertheless. So this claim of a rabbi limited this many centuries later is really ignorant of everything that had even happened at that point. But normal banter for rabbis, no surprise. They're illiterate on many things, and purposely so. They're not allowed to tell us the truth. They're not allowed to tell time properly. That's their doctrine. Understand that. They're not supposed to tell the Goyim the truth. That's the way that Phariseeism and Judaism works. Let's continue. The Gemara continues, and this was due to the incident of King Ptolemy, as it is taught in Bereta. Well, actually, they're getting it from an ancient letter that is not even credible, but let's show you. There was an incident involving King Ptolemy of Egypt, who assembled 72 elders from the sages of Israel. So far, they're repeating the story accurately to the letter. However, then they change it, of course, and put them into 72 separate rooms. Why would they need to be in 72 separate rooms? These are the kinds of nonsensical things the Pharisees love to add, whether they were or not, and did not reveal to them for what purpose he assembled them. Really? And they went? Are they really? Were they really that dumb? Because that's what we'd have to believe. These are translators of the Bible who were brought together to do what? They don't know? Are you kidding? This is ridiculous. That is not in the original story. They've added to it even there. And it's an outright lie, which lines the Talmud throughout. No surprise. So that they would not coordinate their responses. Oh, now that is really stupid. Unnecessary embellishment indeed. Right there in the Talmud, they call this scripture. Are you kidding me? This is trash. Why would that even matter to the king of Egypt? Nonsense. He entered and approached each and every one. The king did. Did he? Did he really do that? And said to each of them, well, actually, no. According to the letter where this story originates, that never happened. Ptolemy was not actually involved beyond funding it and writing a letter to commission it, and wrote a letter to the high priest explaining what he wanted them to do so they knew exactly what they were there for. Duh. It is the head of the Library of Alexandria who led the whole process. The Library of Alexandria, again, the most occult library in history. Yeah. Nope. Something's really wrong with this story. There's another lie, though, either way. Write for me a translation of the Torah of Moses, your teacher. Again, just Torah. The 5 books, supposedly, according to the original letter even, which already tells you this is a Pharisee narrative, not a temple priest narrative, because they kept 6 books. As if each translator translated Torah, the whole Torah, by the way, in 72 days, supposedly. And then they took those 72 translations and compared them. Okay, that is an impossible timeline. Didn't happen. No way. Not credibly. It would be worthless if they did so. It would be too haphazard and doesn't make any sense. You don't treat Scripture this way. What a dumb story that the Talmud is embellishing here. The Holy One, blessed be He, placed wisdom in the heart of each and every one. So now they're going to create a miracle because that's what rabbis have to do because they don't actually have any miracles to tell. So they have to lie about them and embellish to try to make it sound like they have some because they don't have any. And they all agreed to one common understanding. Okay, so basically, it's a miracle. They all gave the exact same translation. No, they didn't. That's impossible. Not only did they all translate the text correctly. How about that? So again, the claim is 72 different translations into the Greek in 72 days, all compared in the same 72 days, and somehow they were the exact same. Ridiculous. Nonsense. Why would they even need to be the exact same? They wouldn't. They all introduced the same changes into the translated text. The same. Incredibly stupid. Why would anyone read this trash, really? I mean, we don't even enjoy reading the Talmud ever because it is nonsense. They have to add lies, leaven, basically that it doesn't even need in the story. And this is the part that just makes no sense. You read it and you're like, why? Why did you do that? Well, because that's what liars do. Understand, just as Jerome did in setting aside or hiding Scripture, that's his word. He used the word apocrypha, which means hidden away. So every time we use the word apocrypha, stop using apocrypha. Use the English. We speak English. Hidden away. They're the hidden away books in English. Wow. The Catholic Church continues to play along with Pharisee claims like this in ignorance. Here's the beginning of the origin of this narrative from a letter called the Letter of Aristeas. This is in the 11th century at the Vatican. No doubt Phariseeism, or Rabbinic Judaism as it is called today, is the origin of the Catholic Church. You can see that in these kinds of doctrines especially. The Bible certainly is not the basis for the Catholic Church or modern Judaism in any sense, really. Torah is not their basis. Talmud is, and it reinterprets the Torah to actually act against Torah according to Mark 7 verse 9 especially. However, let's go all the way back to this origin in 300 BC, based on a letter dated, well, it's dated 2 centuries later, supposedly, but King Ptolemy of Egypt funded the head of the Library of Alexandria, which who was not even in Alexandria at the time. Oops. Yeah, that's another problem, the timeline, and we'll get there. To bring 6 Hebrews from each of the 12 tribes of Israel, because they don't know the Bible tradition that only one tribe does that. Stupid. To translate Torah, the first 5 books, according to this letter, which is already a problem, we'll cover this, the law, essentially, into the Greek language, and just those books. Again, these 72 translators, 6 from each tribe of Israel, understand, supposedly translated all of Torah in 72 days. They also supposedly all lived in Judea, which is utterly stupid, never happened in all of history. The story seems harmless until you really step back and break it down, and its claims fall apart. Is there any confirmation in the Bible of this occurring? Well, if there was, then we would get it, right? I mean, we'd all know this already, but would it not be mentioned in the New Testament? Yeah, it would. Oops, it's not there. This never happened. However, its problems are far greater than that. Oh, something happened. The Septuagint has been translated. It just wasn't translated by Israel. It wasn't translated by the temple priests, who were the only ones legitimately who could have. Oops, that's a problem. They were not in Egypt, and they did not take trips to Egypt, especially not when the letter was written to the wrong high priest who lived 50 years afterwards. Now that's stupid. This whole narrative falls apart very easily. Nothing matches. So let's just break down the lies here. The whole letter actually is rather involved. There's a lot of detail. Read it. We've shown you the book. You can go find it pretty easily. Download it for free. The PDF is out there. You can download and read it all. Go ahead. Lie number 1 in this letter to his brother. In this letter, Demetrius, head librarian of Alexandria, the, again, infamous occult library in Egypt, supposedly expressed the purpose here. And this really tells you this whole narrative is an awful falsehood. I mean, this is pretty bad. He'll tell us they need to fix the Bible, essentially, in Egypt. Oh, wait a minute. What? This is in the time that the sons of Zadok, that Enoch or Ezekiel says are holy, are still in the temple. Oops. Still practicing, still holy. And the Bible needs to be fixed by the Library of Alexandria, the home of the occult? Really? So they wanted to change the Bible, and supposedly the 12 tribes of Israel, 10 of which, by the way, are no longer even in Israel, let alone in Judea, where they would have to be to fit this narrative. Oops. The whole thing is nonsense. And supposedly those priests and holy men, they were okay with that? Nonsense. If they accomplished the same, they changed the Bible, according to the aim, rendering this whole process useless. Now, we'll read the words from this letter, published in academia even, in English by an Oxford scholar in, I think, 1917. Demetrius, the librarian of Alexandria, the occultist who equated Zeus with Yahuwah, understand that, In fact, those are his earlier words in this letter, which is nonsense. He wrote, "The books of the Jewish law, with some few others, are wanting." In other words, they're lacking. They're not accurate. That's what he's saying. "They are written in Hebrew letter and in the Hebrew tongue and have been interpreted." Now, get this accusation. Here it comes from this occultist blowhard who wouldn't have a clue, and by the way, wasn't even alive when this supposedly happened. Duh. But anyway, I digress. Interpreted somewhat carelessly, he says. What? So the scribes, whose calling was to copy over the Hebrew, with many looking over their work, in fact, to prove it, including the priests using it in application, well, just nobody even noticed that, well, they just changed the Bible when they were supposed to copy it exactly as it already read. This is sheer stupidity, and this is modern scholarship believes this today. They actually talk all the time about how scribes corrupted the Bible. Any scribe that corrupted the Bible was a fraud, period. Scribes did not make mistakes. If you see a copy that has a scribal error, that is literally a scribal error, you have a scribe who was not good at his job. He was supposed to memorize every letter of the text that he was to copy, and he was to do it in exactness, period. Pharisees have those kinds of scribes who change the Bible, and they still do it, and this narrative is a perfect example. It is unacceptable, and it is illiterate to level that accusation at the temple priests. But it gets worse. Check this out. "And do not represent the original text." What? What ignorance. "The sons of Zadok remained holy," said Ezekiel. They did not corrupt text. That's nonsense. No way. This is where scholarship gets this. And you hear this in scholarship on a regular basis, and it is stupidity. It is not the reality of the temple priests, who did not corrupt Scripture. Anyone that did changes it and is cursed. Understand that. They well knew. Now, where did he get this from? It's the same kind of dumb reasoning, again, we see today, and it comes from the Pharisees, ultimately. See, they're okay with lies. They're okay with somebody else writing a text claiming to be such and such a prophet many centuries later. They think that's okay. We do not, and the Bible paradigm does not. When Tobit says he wrote the book at the time that he was in Assyria in the 600 BC era, well, guess what? That's when it was written. Not even 50 years later. But then it was finished by his son after his death, but probably very shortly after, and being recorded as he died. Who? When? Who are they? What do they really even believe or not? The whole unqualified use of such is ridiculous. And this is how you can vet scholars very quickly. He made toothpaste commercials too, don't you know? 9 out of 10 dentists say, right? Who cares? Who cares? Because that was used to peddle a lot of lies, even on commercials. According to information supplied by experts of what? The occult. That's what. Well, it appears so because he wants to change the Bible. He already admitted. Understand that. Why? Now, talk about flabbergasting. They are wrong because they have never received a king's fostering care. What? I'm sorry. Was King David a writer of part of Scripture? Not a king. Was King Solomon not a king? Are you kidding? This is stupidity. This is clearly written by one completely illiterate of the Bible paradigm. So now he's telling you they want to change the Bible. That's what he's saying. And the Hebrews sign off on this? Ridiculous. No way. It's like saying, hey, let's let China change the Bible and create a new one. Let's let AI go back and reinterpret the Bible so that it's, well, accurate. Accurate? You think AI is known for accuracy on such. No, it's capable of propaganda. It's a thinking life form of sort. So it is necessary that these books too should, in an amended form. What? You amend something, that means you change it, does it not? Yeah. He wanted to change the Bible. That's what he said right here in this letter. This is the origin of the Talmud and the Catholic Church claim of the 72 supposed scribes that went to Egypt and translated this. We've had comments to this that people have said, I'm starting to believe that maybe that's a true story, that maybe even the sons of Zadok went to... No, they did not. This is ridiculous. There's no way that they would participate in this, and they did not need to. They could translate into Greek from the temple. Why would they leave it? Why would they leave their resources to do that in Egypt? Nonsense. Why would they partner with the most occult library in the world, known for such? Nonsense. Really, an Egyptian occultist, understand, says that Yahuwah's law now is divine. Really? I'm pretty sure he didn't actually believe that. Because he says, because this code of laws, in that it is divine. Yeah, right. Talk about bizarre world. That is backwards. That is a lie. Because he didn't believe that. It'd be cool if he did, but we know he didn't. Of course, it wouldn't matter because this guy wasn't even alive at the time that this supposedly happened. Whoops. Is full of wisdom and faultless. Oh, wait. If it's faultless, why isn't Egypt following it instead of its own laws? Oh, that's a real problem, is it not? Of course it is, and it's nonsense that he would say something like that to a king. He would be killed for that. There's no way that any of this happened. It's a complete lie and picked up as doctrine by the Talmud and by the Catholic Church, and then peddled in the Protestant Church and peddled into our thinking today and into scholarship. And scholars just don't bother to go back and look at anything, it appears. Lie number 2, and really we could number each of these separately as there are several here, but we're just going to leave them as just lie number 2. The history timeline of this letter's claim, basically, of the people involved is false. You have 3 main characters who didn't live at the same time. Oops, that's a real problem. I mean, neither one overlaps with the other. One lived, then the other, but not at the same time. And they weren't in Egypt at the same time, and they weren't, it's nonsense. They weren't in the positions at the same time. In fact, one is the enemy of the other even, and supposedly worked for him. That's nonsense. I mean, this is just really bad. It's a total lie. It's false. They didn't even live at the same time. That's really bad. There are many problems here, but we're just going to cover a few. Let's show you. In the publishing of this letter from 1917, basically, by Thackeray of Oxford, he observed this account was, in fact, a lie. And that's what he says. Here are his words, and he's not the only. I mean, anyone really that reads this kind of knows. Rabbis, of course, won't admit it, although some will and will still choose to repeat the account anyway, because that is their way. That's normal for them. That the letter is not what it professes to be. Well, it's a lie. See, that's what it means. He's being nice. A contemporary record of a Greek who played a prominent part in the actions describes, translating Torah into Greek, that is, has long been recognized. So what's recognized here? In other words, this has long been recognized as a fraud. Understand that. And that's the origin of this story. In various ways, the writer betrays himself. Indeed, he does. Whoever wrote this had no clue how the Bible paradigm operated, even on a basic level. And this whole story really vets as a lie. They didn't even know history. It's really bad. Continued, he, Demetrius, head librarian of Alexandria, who is identified in this letter very clearly, was not a contemporary of Ptolemy Philadelphus, who was the Ptolemy of that era. Oops, that's a problem, also identified. In other words, this is a fabricated history. because the two characters didn't live at the same time, and that's just those two. There's another with the leader of the temple, the high priest of the temple, that didn't serve at the time that either of these guys served. So, is really the question. He continues that there are at least two errors in which the writer forgets his own role, even. Now, that's pretty bad. You can mess up history, but you know, messing up your own role, that's pretty bad. This is a lie. He repeats again, the timeline is off here. Demetrius the librarian could not fit this history. This is the occult Alexandria trying to claim it translated the Septuagint, which it probably did, but it's claiming that it did so with the assistance of the 12 tribes, yet that claim fails. 12 tribes weren't involved. Only one should be, the Levites, and they were not. It's a lie. They did it, and were trying to lie to make it credible, because no one would accept a translation from occultists of the Bible. Now, in all fairness, is it a bad translation? It's okay, but it's not perfect. And to look at it as the original scripture is backwards, because the original is in the Hebrew. Much of that survives in the Dead Sea Scrolls. Many of those texts predate the Septuagint. Whether the stupid rabbis who guess at the dates, which is usually what they do, they don't actually go and scientifically test, and they forget that these are copies. They're copied over every century or so, however often they did it, which was the scribal tradition. So it's nonsense to think that these copies, I think Tobit is a perfect example. We're going to go into that soon. He wrote in the 600 to 700 BC era. And he wrote when he wrote. He says he wrote, and he wrote what he wrote. So it's the problem is that then they'll say, oh, well, no, it was only written in 150 BC because, he talks about idols. So if he talks about idols, if anybody talks about idols in any narrative, that means it had to be written during Hellenism, which is utter stupidity. I mean, idols were far worse for Abraham in his era. Which means Abraham could have written in his own era? Yeah, right. Tobit was in Nineveh. Are you kidding? Assyria was a capital for idols. There's no doubt about that. How many times do we have to just know a little bit about this before we buy this stupid scholarship on these things? Is amazing. Now, this Oxford scholar concluded this author, of this letter, basically, whoever he was, did not know history, was guilty of inaccuracies, in fact. In other words, lies. He didn't know history. Demetrius was supposedly best friends with the very king who banished him. Kind of missed that. This becomes a clown circus, really. How could anyone take this letter and history seriously? It's not history. It is falsified. The story never happened, at least not this way. Egyptian Essenes and occult priests are the translators of the Septuagint. Let's just call a spade a spade. That's who did it, because that's where it was translated, and no temple priests were there, and none would go there. They wouldn't leave the temple. And even their story doesn't even get that, and forgets that, Levites have to do that, not 6 of each of the tribes. Pretty bad. There is also mention of a philosopher, Menedemus of Eritrea, who supposedly visited Alexandria, which never happened in any other history anywhere, in allusion to a naval victory of Ptolemy, which was actually a defeat. Little backwards there. Pretty stupid, really, and false. If written by the head of the Library of Alexandria even, though an occultist, he at least would be accurate on those points, you would think, especially the history of Ptolemy, his own king. He better, or he's dead. How can you screw that up? Well, you can't, because again, King Ptolemy would kill you if that was your role. It's pretty bad. It's unbelievable, not trustworthy, and makes the entire letter suspect. because it is suspect. It's false. We could actually continue with multiple videos on the many problems of this letter historically. It's that bad, but generally this introduction notes, just quick, the book in short belongs to the fairly large class of works, which sure designates one of the scholars. Get this classification though, because it applies to the apocryphal books that fail as well. He called it Jewish propaganda under a heathen mask. How about that? The writers of the Bible never did so. They didn't need to. Only Pharisees attempt such illiterate strategies, and it is super obvious every time they do it. In Professor Andrews' words, it is not too much to say that the writer's one object is to demonstrate the supremacy of the Jewish people. Now, see, here's something he didn't get. He's talking about the synagogue of Satan, who say they are Yahudim and are not, but do lie. Oops, confusing the peoples. That's what they're doing. It's a Samaritan Pharisee practice, never a Bible one. Samaritans tried to profess themselves as tribes of Israel all along. They were always liars when they did so. Now, the Jewish priesthood, you mean of Pharisees, because that's what he's talking about, the imposters who must bolster their egos, as Yahusha called them out. I mean, that's what he said. Understand that? The Jewish law, well, that's Pharisee in this case, Pharisee interpretation of it. The Jewish philosophy, Pharisee. They are the Stoics. The Bible isn't about philosophy. There's wisdom, but not philosophy. That's a cult. And the Jewish Bible, Pharisee Bible, of course, their interpretation. This is a Pharisee writing to bolster Pharisee claims. That's what it is. It is not the practice of a temple priest, and the Bible never needs this tactic. Why do they do so? Because they're trying to confuse themselves, the fake Jews, as many would call them, the ones who falsified, the imposters, the replacements from Samaria, who came down and attacked the temple and usurped the priesthood. Those guys, they're not temple priests. They're not tribes of Israel. And if they, in fact, went to Egypt at some point to translate, that would be no surprise, because they fit the occult paradigm in Egypt, and maybe they would. But regardless, it never happened as far as the temple priests, who were the only ones that would go, and the only ones that should be invited, and the only ones that would accept the invitation in the first place, if someone actually knew a little bit about the Bible paradigm, which this letter and this whole history and the Pharisees generally do not. The other timeline problem, and there are, again, so many, we could really spend a lot of time on this, is that Eleazar was supposedly the high priest of the temple in Jerusalem during this time. Oops. He even responded in a letter, supposedly. Here's part of that, at least the beginning of it on screen. The problem is, Eleazar would not be high priest for decades later. Essentially, the three main characters, King Ptolemy, Demetrius the librarian of Alexandria, and Eleazar the high priest, well, those three do not overlap together in time, and this vets as a lie. So obviously, this is contrived. Why is it contrived? To confuse Samaritans as Israel. That's the ultimate purpose here. Also, and even worse, also for Maccabees, which is really written in the same kind of vein by an extremely illiterate Pharisee who knew nothing of history, gets it way wrong, but made up his own, really, and certainly not the Bible, didn't know it for sure, which he also proves he was an occultist as well. Judea, remember this, was already part of Ptolemy's territory, yet this letter claims he then sacked Judea and took Judeans captive. No, he didn't. He didn't need to. If he did anything, he would have liberated it from the Seleucid, kings. But and there was some skirmish there, but it was his territory. He wasn't conquering his own territory. Winning it back at times, perhaps. Since Alexandria the Great, the Ptolemies had Judea under their territory That's what history says. We've covered that before in Daniel's 2300 days, in fact. They did not need to conquer it and take slaves, and they wouldn't, from a territory that was their own. See, this is very telling, though, because they did sack portions of Samaria. That did happen, which they even admit in this letter, and they did take slaves there, Samaritans, not Hebrews. See, that's the problem. And certainly not lost tribes who, were not even in northern Israel at that point. The slaves they took were not tribes of Israel. What this letter does is, and again, this is its intent, it confuses Samaritans as tribes of Israel, whom the Pharisees originated from Samaria and are not Hebrews, not originally. Doesn't mean some didn't mix in, but still, they're not the lost tribes of Israel. They never were. Oops. This is a common theme in this genre previously referred to, what I showed you, by scholars as Jewish propaganda. Well, really, they should be calling it not Jewish. Of course, the word Jew is not a Bible word. Watch origin of the word Jew. You can't render the word in ancient Hebrew, Greek, Aramaic, Latin, Old French, Old German, nor Old English. Oops. The word is Yahudim. And in short, they would be called Yahs. That's another major lie, but watch that video. If you read this letter from Eleazar, though, it is lousy. A temple priest who supposedly focuses on the lavish gifts, giving every detail of how the legs were formed with gold or whatever, and how lavish they were, and all this. It's just nonsense. No temple priest would do that. No temple priest would be impressed by that. And in reality, none would accept this whole commission by Ptolemy. They would do this for free, and they would do it in the temple, because this is Scripture. This was their purpose all along. It would be the center of Pharisee attention in embellishment, which makes this obvious. Pharisees work in that vein. It's the way they speak. It's the way they operate. Yahusha even said so. Line number 3, and we're going to go to about 7 here. The letter claims 6 from each of the 12 tribes of Israel were taken to Egypt to translate. Oops, 10 of those tribes are gone and not in Israel. Oh, well, no, wait a minute. They claim they were all in Judea. Oh, that's a lie. None of them were even there to be taken for this service. Only Judea, which is only 2 tribes plus Levites. Since when was Egypt, by the way, a better place for the priesthood to practice Bible translation instead of the temple? What utter nonsense. 2 Kings 17:18. Yes, we know most scholars are not aware of 2 Kings 17. And wow, is that their problem? Not ours or yours. Prove all things. The word is the end authority. It says what it says. Therefore Yahuwah was very angry with Israel, that's the northern 10 tribes, and removed them out of his sight. There was none left but the tribe of Judah only. Now Judah at that time included Benjamin and especially the temple Levites, who are the keepers of Scripture, ordained to do so. The 10 northern tribes were all taken captive into Assyria. All. Every one of them. None were left. That's what it says. Does the Bible mean what it says or not? And this isn't the only time it says so. So this is also, by the way, the promise of Yahuwah as their curse for breaking their covenant with him. He did not lie. And any scholar trying to argue that even one was left is calling him impotent, ineffective, and unrighteous. Let's just call it what it is. And a liar. That's what they're calling him. They're not believers of the word. In verse 23, the northern tribes of Israel, here it is again, 10 of the 12, or really 13, by the way. We're not going to go into that in this video, but really there's 13 tribes if you break it down. Remained in Assyria in the day in which Kings was written by the prophet Jeremiah. None returned. They were still there in that day. they were replaced. And that was never an option. They never returned. See, in verse 24, impostors were brought in to replace northern Israel, and this is whom this letter, Maccabees and Judith, all confuse as lost tribes of Israel when they are not Israel at all. Modern Israel makes the same claim and also cannot prove they are actually Israelites. Did you know that? Well, watch the True Biblical Israel series, and you will know. These replacements feared not Yahuwah, and the lions were devouring them. So they had one Levite priest brought in to teach them the ways of Yahuwah, but they did not serve him, and they still do not today. For this, my friends, is the conception of what we call Judaism today. Verse 28 of chapter 17 as well tells us they instead attempted to infuse their pagan gods into the worship of Yahuwah instead of the other way around. They should have abandoned their pagan gods if they were sincere. They were never sincere, and their practice is not that of the Bible. It's the opposite. That is always rejected in any sense by Yahuwah. He doesn't mix with other gods. This new religion at that time would become known as Phariseeism when it came into Jerusalem and took over the worship system there, which became Rabbinic Judaism according to the Jewish Encyclopedia even. In the Second Temple, after the Second Temple was destroyed, they had to change some rules, and they did, and they rebranded. There is no mystery here. The track is easy to spot and easy to follow. Watch the True Biblical Israel series for more. The very valuable book in the 1611 KJV Apocrypha, Second Esdras, and we published it, and wow, it'll raise the hairs on the back of your neck, the accuracy of prophecy. And that is the best way to judge a prophetic book, when it is accurate, and it is so perfectly accurate. Over 2,000 years it remains accurate, and it's predicted this whole entire time. It documents the northern tribes either stayed in Assyria or some migrated further to the east. They divided at that point, and they're in two places. Now, we prove those to be the isles of the east at the ends of the earth, which is known as Tarshish and Ophir and Sheba, Philippines. That's what we prove. You have to review the research. Don't even think about arguing with that and debating that here. That's not what this video is about. We prove it there. We have a book, 2 books actually. You really need to review the case. Do not respond in ignorance. We will mute you. Our channel, our rules. Watch our Lost Tribes series. Watch Solomon's Gold series. See for yourself. We prove that. None returned to Israel. Again, not an option. Their land was given to others who did not welcome them back, and they didn't have homes there anymore. Again, not an option. Their land was gone. They had no right to it anymore. It was given to another. Now, they dwelled in Assyria, continued to, which is modern Kurdistan. It's not all Kurds, but it is some within the population. And the rest went to the Philippines, the isles of the east at the ends of the earth. But they're there till when? Until the latter time. The last days, folks. See, the regathering does not occur until the last days. They are still there. Yes, they are scattered among the nations, as Filipinos are, in every nation on earth today, but they still identify mostly with their homeland. Kurds, by the way, are also in 66 countries that we've covered. That's 2/3 of the world. Also scattered. So they're both scattered, as Scripture's clear that they would be, but they have a homeland. They still identify with. Isaiah 11 is clear. These return from the same regions of their initial migrations out of Israel. So this paradigm remains to the last days. It doesn't change. And the scattering has nothing to do with any of it. They used that to confuse us all. Oh, they're supposed to be scattered so you can't find them. Yes, you can. They still identify. Lie number 4, and then a few more left, and this is the big one. It is claimed in this letter that the supposed translators they got from Judea were 6, from each of the 12 tribes, as we said before. Not only are 10 of the 12 tribes not even in Judea, as we've established, and they remained enemies of Judea, by the way. Oops. Yeah, that's a problem. The north and the south do not mix, according to Scripture, in Israel since the days of Solomon. And actually, all the way until the end times, they're still at each other. They do not reconcile until the final regathering at the end. At this time, the north is gone completely and never returned, and Samaria is full of Samaritans and impostors, not Israel. That's why the parable of the Good Samaritan, it's unthinkable that a Samaritan could actually be good. That's the point of the parable. However, who were the keepers, the custodians of Scripture again? Well, we covered this last video. Just one tribe, folks, the Levites only. And of them, a specific family, the sons of Zadok, as it became. They were the ones who were holy. It doesn't take 6 from each of the 12 tribes. That, to even make the claim, is utter stupidity. It is complete ignorance of the paradigm. It takes Levites to translate the Bible, period. They are the only ones qualified to be the scribes and the writers of Scripture. Moses only ordained them for that purpose. There is no other who is called, even within Israel, to do so. I mean, this is as inept as it gets. And Levites leaving the temple, where they had the resources to translate, taking those scrolls and all of their resources with them to Egypt out of the temple, absolutely nuts. Did not happen. This is a lie. Would they trust the occult library of Alexandria when they could do that work there at the temple? Of course they wouldn't. The only time they will take them is in their exile, which is permanent, to Qumran, which is Bethabara in Scripture, where they will continue to keep Bible Canon, as that is their ordination. That's it. This proves whomever wrote this letter and made up this fictional account had no clue about the biblical manner of keeping Scripture, and that is at the root of the whole topic. How about that? Lie number 5, this letter claims there were only 5 books of Torah. Now, I know we've all heard that. That is absolutely, exclusively a Pharisee claim, not one of the temple priests, the keepers of Scripture. The Bible never mentions only 5 books. That's not there, of Torah. But in fact, the Bible, yes, even Moses, identifies 6 books, because he quotes one as Torah that we forget in Genesis. I believe it's 48, but we'll go there. Qumran Bethabara kept 6 books as Torah, not 5. See, this is a Samaritan Pharisee paradigm and assertion proving the origin of this whole lie. According to the Bethabara community, writing in Qumran, as they call it today, called the Damascus document, it says, in their own words, "For Elohim made a covenant with you and all Israel. Therefore a man shall bind himself by oath to return to the law of Moses," Torah. "For in it all things are strictly defined. As for the exact determination of their times," of what? Of Torah. In other words, what they're about to define is Torah. Get that? "To which Israel turns a blind eye." In other words, Pharisees, the Pharisee paradigm, turned a blind eye to this book about to be identified, that the temple priests are telling us is Torah and is to be used for the exact determination of the times of Torah. Wow. "Behold, it is strictly defined." Could the language not be more exact here? "In the book of the divisions of the times into their jubilees and weeks." Today we call this the book of Jubilees. They call it the book of division in Africa, but that's appropriate. Those are the first words of the book. The real full title is right there. That's it. But it's Jubilees, and Jubilees is Torah, written by Moses, containing the law of Moses and how to keep it. Says the actual keepers of Scripture, the sons of Zadok. How about that? Not only was it the sixth most numerous scroll found there, they labeled Jubilees in writing right here and used it in application as Torah. I mean, they're quoting it verbatim here. Torah has 6 books, folks. Read our publishing at bookofjubilees.org with Torah test for yourself and prove all things. It's free in eBook. Test it for yourself. But is Jubilees Apocrypha? No, it was never in the 1611 King James Apocrypha, which is what we're dealing with. It's called pseudepigrapha, which refers to false authors. In other words, the idiots who came up with the term don't believe that Moses authored his own book. But see, here's the problem. Moses said he did. Let me show you. These are not Bible scholars. When they find things like this, though they probably never really considered it, and that's their fallacy, certainly not ours. But here we go with Moses quoting Moses. Yes, Moses' Genesis is quoting Moses' Jubilees as Torah in existence in his time. Wow, this is amazing. Why don't scholars conduct even a little bit of research on this topic? They're very lame on it, unfortunately. They're truly illiterate on this topic, and they prove to be because they're steeped in a paradigm, not because they're dumb guys. Obviously, they're very smart. They're very educated, but they're educated into a paradigm. When Jacob, Israel, was dying, he told Joseph he had a greater inheritance for him, which he had taken out of the hand of the Amorite. Well, there is a tribute that he exacted from the Amorites, but there's a problem. That's not mentioned in the whole of Genesis. There's no war with the Amorites. Where does Moses get that from? He's quoting Jubilees chapter 34. Really the whole chapter, because the whole story is there and not in Genesis. Wow. For those who have read the very occult modern Jasher, let's just address this. Watch Testing the Book of Jasher. That account doesn't actually match the claim here, nor especially the claim in Joshua and the claim in Samuel, which are also Jubilees as the book of Yashar, upright, Torah. Both of those accounts in Joshua and Samuel are quoting Jubilees as well. That is the wrong story, and the book includes, by the way, over 100 overt occult lies. I mean, it is one of the most disgusting displays we have ever tested and seen. Test it for yourself. Watch Testing the Book of Modern Jasher. All right, we're almost there. Lie number 6, the time frame of 72 days for 72 scribes to translate even 5 books of Torah into Greek is really haphazard negligence. And then to take it further, we showed you the Pharisee Talmud, which claims that they each translated the 5 books themselves. So you have 72 different translations, which were then compared, and all of that was done in 72 days. That is illiterate nonsense. Didn't happen. Impossible. When the 47 translators of the King James Version into English published in 1611, they were scholars and theologians, and it took them 7 years. And they already had an English translation to start from Tyndale for a good piece of it to use as a basis. It is not that 72 people couldn't split up the 5 books and translate them in 72 days, perhaps, which, by the way, is not the Talmudic claim, which is a full lie, even worse. It's the incredibly irresponsible notion that it would be thrown together in such a careless manner, especially after the librarian responsible called the origin a careless translation. I mean, this vets as a lie. There's no way. And lie number 7, and again, we could go on and on. The Greeks embraced biblical law. That's the claim of this letter. When? When did that happen? Are you kidding? It never happened. We'll make this the last one, but again, we could keep going. There's so many problems with this letter in claim. It is a lie. The Oxford professor that published this also had a major problem with this thinking, as he should have. You can read his introduction in the book. It's extensive, the number of things that he also finds. And again, we could expound this video into several, but we're not going to. It's not worth it. We just needed to prove this was a lie, and it firmly is already. Whether you disagree with one or two of these points really doesn't matter. If any one of them sticks, that's it. Done. No, this whole story is embellished. Alexandria did translate the books, indeed, but they were not especially temple priests. And that's why we've said that many times. Now we're showing you why we say so. They knew they weren't, and their translation would have no credibility or legitimacy, as it should not, especially as scripture. Again, it can be a useful tool, but you got to keep it in perspective. You can use even occult Greek writings as a tool to understand Scripture in some cases. Yes, you can. We do it with the river Oceanus, which proves to be the rivers from Eden. So they understood the rivers from Eden, at least some, and show some agreement there. Or even believable. I mean, that's the thing here. Is it even believable? And of course, this letter is not. They're trying to make it believable by tying it to 6 of the 12 tribes of Israel, 6 from each. But that's a problem already because that is a lie. It's false. It's a misunderstanding of the paradigm, which is an obvious false claim. From the introduction of this letter's publishing by the guy from Oxford, the translation was produced at Alexandria, as is conclusively proved by the Egyptian influence, he says, which one would not see if Judeans wrote it. See, oops, that's a problem. They are caught red-handed. On its language, he says, to which the new found papyri furnish the closest parallel. So even the language clarifies this is an Egyptian creation, see, not one from Judea, and Israel was never involved. Not one from Judea was involved, and if they were not Hebrew. That's the problem. And bigger, they were not temple priests. Ouch. Thus, no legitimacy to this letter or claim whatsoever. Indeed, this is an extreme myth regarding the origin of the Greek Septuagint. It did not happen that way, and would not. It is illiterate to say so. The temple priest would have translated from the temple, and didn't need Greek prompting them to do so. Greece, or Ptolemy, Greek, Egypt, either way. In fact, some of the Greek texts found in Qumran that they claim to be the Septuagint, well, why would it have to be the Septuagint? Oh, think about that. See, they can't even do this. They don't even know how to separate. Because they are translated into Greek, it has to be the Septuagint, they think. That's stupid. Everything translated into Greek does not have to be credited to the Egyptians. Thank you. This is another illiterate lie. These were likely translated by the temple priests, though we have no track for that either, but don't need it. It's found in Qumran. Therefore, it is a temple priest document, and not the Egyptians who created the Septuagint. So it's probably, even though they say, oh, the Greek Septuagint was found in Qumran, no, Greek copies were found there. How about that? Understand, even with this seedy false claim in history, the Greek Septuagint is still useful, and we've said that many times and since the beginning of this video. Sometimes we can find things preserved there, such as Canaan, the grandson of Shem, who is erased from modern Genesis. Yet, it is found in Luke, in Jubilees, in the Samaritan Pentateuch, and others, as well as the Septuagint. So there we find that that was not changed in the Septuagint, whereas it has been in modern Genesis. Oops, which has been changed, altered. Yes, it has. Along with that, watch who changed Genesis. Along with that, they changed ages of at least 6 patriarchs who were 100 years older when they had children, according to the other sources. Modern Genesis is standing alone on that. Essentially, they shaved 700 years off the calendar, which is why the Jewish calendar, the Hebrew so-called calendar, is false. And their year has been wrong all along. Then they rendered years much further from the end times, which is their real purpose, than we actually are. And that's because we're following the actual ancient precedents that they're not, because they changed it. Standard Pharisee in the church has fallen for this leaven on so many topics. Now, the Greek Septuagint was only Torah at first, according to this claim, and likely that is the case. That's a sensible place to start, though you would think it would be 6 books, not 5, but we don't know that Jubilees was ever in the Septuagint, in all fairness. We have no evidence of that, and we don't need it, because we have the temple priest evidence, so we know it was in the actual Torah. And the fact that it's missing means that this is a false document as far as trying to determine which books are in the Bible and which are not, because they're not the keepers of Bible Canon. They're not the custodians of Scripture. The Qumran Bethabara temple priests that were exiled there were. Now, the Greek Septuagint was only Torah at first again, and eventually a full Bible of sort. They did add the other books in time. However, even so, it included these books, which Jerome would largely label Apocrypha, or hidden away books in English, but they must all be tested. It's not enough to just say even that they were found in Qumran. No, we need to test them, and we will in this series. Now, basically, we should call them by their actual name. They are not Apocrypha, they are hidden away and need to be tested. One false narrative after another, and no wonder scholars just give up, but we cannot and we will not. If we do not prove all things, we will never know the truth. And without the truth, man, we'll never understand prophecy. We'll never understand the last days. So many things are coming together now in these days of increasing knowledge. The most exciting time to be alive. Rise, remnant, rise. Next, we'll cover the canon of Josephus. Who was he? Well, not a biblical keeper of Bible Canon, that's for sure. And then we enter book by book, starting, I'm pretty sure we're going to start with the book of Tobit. Remember to like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel and enjoy our other platforms and websites, all in the description box. We have published 9 books in 3 years, and we ain't stopping. More to come. We love you all, and always remember, prove all things for yourself. Yah bless to everyone.